My name is Valerie Cross. I'm 34, and for nearly a decade, I'd been meticulously crafting a life utterly distinct from the one my lineage believed I was capable of. The grand, iron-bound doors of the district courthouse groaned open, releasing a finality that resonated through the hushed hall. Every gaze in the crowded public gallery seemed to pivot toward me. My younger brother, Maxwell, slumped at the defense table, his custom-tailored suit rumpled from a night in lockup, his counsel urgently whispering into his ear. Behind him, our parents sat entwined, their faces etched with the desperate hope of individuals whose entire self-worth was intricately tied to their favored son's perceived triumphs. Not one of them had bothered to contact me following Maxwell's arrest. Not when the federal indictment landed, nor when his high-profile tech enterprise faced immediate scrutiny over its lucrative government contracts. Their outreach came only 72 hours prior, a last-minute plea for anyone, to vouch for his character during the bail proceedings. Valerie still owes us this much. I'd overheard my mother's voice, tinny and accidental, on a voicemail meant for my father. She might be a letdown, but she's family. A letdown. That phrase had been my constant companion throughout my formative years, a quiet murmur at family gatherings when my academic performance wasn't quite as flawless as Maxwell's, or a blunt pronouncement when I chose to enlist rather than pursue the legal career they'd painstakingly mapped out. It had been the very last thing my father uttered to me before I departed for basic training 9 years ago. I pray you find joy in being a disappointment to this family. I hadn't exchanged a single word with them since. Now, as I navigated the central aisle of the federal courthouse, I could practically feel their bewilderment radiating off them. My mother's eyes followed my every move, taking in the impeccably tailored charcoal suit, the assured, purposeful stride, the way other attendees in the gallery, individuals in expensive business attire and polished military uniforms, offered subtle, respectful nods as I passed. Her expression was a peculiar mix of confusion and indignation, as if I were engaging in some elaborate charade in a world that decidedly wasn't mine. The prosecutor, Justine Monroe, a sharp-eyed attorney with whom I'd collaborated on previous cases, caught my eye and offered an almost imperceptible inclination of her head. We had meticulously strategized this exact moment. Maxwell's charges extended far beyond simple financial impropriety. They involved the systematic sale of classified intelligence to hostile foreign powers. Information he had gained direct access to through his government dealings. Data that had compromised active operations and jeopardized invaluable assets. My assets. Justice Henderson settled into his elevated seat, and a profound hush descended upon the courtroom. The court will now hear testimony from character witnesses on behalf of the defendant, Maxwell Carter. My father was the first to rise, his voice trembling as he extolled his son's extraordinary intellect, his groundbreaking contributions to the tech sector, his undeniably brilliant future. My mother followed, her voice choked with tears and desperate pleas, painting Maxwell as a misunderstood savant who had merely made a few regrettable business judgments. Next, Maxwell's former college roommate took the stand, followed by his chief business partner, and 3 other individuals who spoke glowingly of his philanthropic endeavors and community outreach. Each testament felt like another nail sealing the coffin of truth, another reinforcing layer of the gilded prodigy myth that had stifled our family for decades. When they concluded, Justice Henderson lifted his gaze. Does the prosecution wish to present any witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Valerie Cross. The silence that followed was absolute, an oppressive weight. I observed the color drain from my mother's face as she processed the words. My father's jaw slackened. Maxwell, for the first time since my entrance into the courtroom, swiveled to face me directly, his former confident smirk dissolving into genuine bewilderment. I rose and moved towards the witness stand, my hand steady as I placed it upon the solemn book and swore to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please state your full name and current occupation for the record, Monroe prompted. Valerie Cross. I serve as a principal investigator within the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Counterintelligence Division. The words struck the courtroom with a palpable force. Behind me, I heard my mother gasp. My father emitted a choked sound. Maxwell stared at me as if I were a complete stranger, a realization that dawned on me. To him, I was. Investigator Cross, how long have you been with the Bureau? 9 years. I joined immediately after concluding my service with Army Intelligence. And what is your current assignment? I lead a multi-agency task force dedicated to preventing the illicit acquisition and sale of sensitive government technology to adversarial foreign entities. Monroe offered a subtle nod. Investigator Cross, are you acquainted with the defendant? I met Maxwell's gaze directly, holding it. Yes, he is my brother. The subsequent 20 minutes unfolded as a meticulous ballet of classified and unclassified disclosure. I recounted the details of the extensive investigation, the months of covert surveillance, the irrefutable evidence that had culminated in Maxwell's apprehension. I spoke in the calm, measured cadence I had perfected over years of briefing high-ranking senators and cabinet secretaries. Yet, beneath my professional composure, I was once again that 9-year-old girl, watching my parents swell with pride as Maxwell claimed another science fair trophy, barely sparing a glance at my own hard-won second-place ribbon. Investigator Cross, Monroe continued, in your professional assessment, do you believe the defendant poses a flight risk? Unequivocally. The defendant has established communication channels with foreign handlers in no fewer than 3 separate nations. He maintains covert financial accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, and based on our surveillance, he was actively planning to flee the country the very day following his arrest. I observed Maxwell's legal team scribbling furiously, saw my parents' knuckles whiten as they gripped each other's hands. They were beginning to grasp that this was not their disappointing daughter attempting to feign importance. This was someone else entirely. Someone they had never bothered to know. Thank you, Investigator Cross. No further questions. Maxwell's defense attorney rose for cross-examination. But what could he possibly ask? How could he undermine the credibility of a seasoned FBI counterintelligence investigator without utterly devastating his own client's defense? Investigator Cross, he began cautiously. Is it not true that you and your brother have been estranged for a significant period? That is correct. Is it not plausible, then, that personal animosity might be influencing your professional judgment? I allowed a faint smile to touch my lips. It was the same smile I reserved for interrogation rooms with cunning foreign agents. The one that conveyed I possessed knowledge they couldn't even begin to fathom. Counselor, my personal sentiments do not fabricate offshore bank accounts or conjure communications with known foreign intelligence operatives. The evidence, sir, speaks for itself. As I descended from the witness stand, the courtroom remained enveloped in silence, broken only by the soft, ragged sound of my mother's weeping. I returned to my seat in the gallery, and this time, every gaze that tracked my movement held a different expression. Respect, apprehension, recognition. After the hearing concluded, I stood in the quiet courthouse hallway, reviewing messages on my secure phone for my team. My parents approached, tentative and hesitant, looking like strangers adrift in their own lives. Valerie, my mother whispered, her voice fragile. Is it true? Are you really? My name is Valerie, I stated, not lifting my gaze from my device. And yes, it is true. My father cleared his throat, a dry, raspy sound. We had no concept. You never informed us. You never inquired. I finally met their eyes, these individuals who had raised me but never genuinely seen me. In 9 years, neither of you once asked about my profession. You simply presumed I remained the same disappointment who couldn't possibly measure up to Maxwell's potential. But darling, my mother said, extending a hand tentatively toward me, if we had known you were so accomplished, what then? Would you have been proud of me? Loved me? I shook my head slowly. I didn't achieve success for your approval. I achieved it despite your expectations. Maxwell appeared then, flanked by his lawyer and 2 federal marshals. His bail had been denied. He would remain in custody pending trial, facing the grim prospect of a quarter-century in federal prison. As they led him past us, he paused. Valley, he uttered, using the childish diminutive that had always made me feel insignificant. You must understand, I never intended for anyone to be harmed. People were harmed, Maxwell. Assets were compromised. Sensitive operations were blown. Individuals I've worked alongside for years had to be extracted from perilous situations because of the information you traded. I stepped closer to him, near enough that only he could hear my next words. And my name is Principal Investigator Cross. The marshals escorted him away, and I observed my parents' carefully constructed world visibly crumble in real time. Everything they had believed about their children, about achievement, about inherent worth, all of it was disintegrating around them. "Valerie," my father said, his voice fractured.
I'm sorry.
"We both are. We were so wrong about you." I studied his face, searching for something I had longed to see there for 34 years. But apologies offered only when coerced by circumstance are not, in their truest form, apologies at all. "I know you are," I said quietly. "But sorry doesn't erase 9 years of profound silence. Sorry doesn't wipe away 34 years of being told I wasn't enough." My phone vibrated. A text from my director. "Exceptional work on the Carter case. Require you back in D.C. tomorrow for the briefing with the National Security Council. Another high-stakes meeting in the Situation Room. Another detailed briefing for the architects of national policy. Another day in the life my family had never bothered to inquire about." I looked at my parents one last time. These strangers who had granted me life, but never truly knew me. "I have a flight to catch," I stated. "Take care of yourselves." As I began to walk away, I heard my mother call out, her voice a plea. Will we see you again?" I paused at the courthouse doors, the very same doors I had entered an hour ago as their disappointing daughter, and was now leaving as someone they could never have conceived. "Perhaps," I replied, "when you truly learn to cherish the daughter you have, not the one you desperately wished you'd had." The crisp winter air enveloped my face as I stepped outside, and I inhaled deeply for the first time in months. Behind me, the courthouse held the wreckage of my brother's life and the shattered assumptions of my parents. Ahead, a waiting vehicle would transport me to the airport, then onward to D.C., back to the work that genuinely mattered, back to the life I had meticulously constructed, one intricate case at a time. My phone chimed, my partner calling with an urgent update on our next operation. As I answered, I caught my reflection in the polished glass of the courthouse windows. The woman staring back at me was not the disappointment my family had conjured in their narrow minds. She was someone who briefed presidents, who thwarted elaborate foreign intelligence plots, who carried secrets capable of altering global dynamics. She was someone I was profoundly proud to be. "Cross here," I affirmed into the phone. And for the first time in 9 years, speaking my own name felt like truly coming home to myself. The courthouse gradually receded in the rearview mirror as my car accelerated away, carrying with it the last remnants of the girl who had desperately craved her family's affirmation. In her place sat a woman who had learned that the most potent form of vindication wasn't destroying those who had underestimated her. It was becoming someone so profoundly extraordinary that their dismissal revealed far more about their own limitations than it ever did about her. My name is Valerie Cross. I am 34 years old, and I am no one's disappointment anymore.